Afternoon. I'm Father Alexander. This is St. Peter's in Hove, and welcome to our 177th step in our walking tour through the Bible. And we've come to what is one of the most depressing psalms in the whole Psalter, one of the most negative psalms in the whole Psalter, one of the most problematic ones from the point of view of belief, and at the same time, one of the greatest psalms, one of the most memorable. It's the one that's used on Friday night at night prayer. It's this one. Lord my God, I call for help by day. I cry at night before you. Let my prayer come into your presence. O turn your ear to my cry. For my soul is filled with evils. My life is on the brink of the grave. I am reckoned as one in the tomb. I have reached the end of my strength. Like one alone among the dead, like the slain lying in their graves, like those you remember no more, cut off as they are from your hand. You have laid me in the depths of the tomb, in places that are dark in the depths. Your anger weighs down upon me. I am drowned beneath your waves. You've taken away my friends and made me hateful in their sight. Imprisoned, I cannot escape. My eyes are sunken with grief. I call to you, Lord, all the day long. To you I stretch out my hands. Will you work your wonders for the dead? Will the shades stand and praise you? Will your love be told in the grave, or your faithfulness among the dead? Will your wonders be known in the dark, or your justice in the land of oblivion? As for me, Lord, I call to you for help. In the morning my prayer comes before you. Lord, why do you reject me? Why do you hide your face? Wretched, close to death from my youth, I have borne your trials. I am numb. Your fury has swept down upon me. Your terrors have utterly destroyed me. They surround me all the day like a flood. They assail me altogether. Friend and neighbour, you've taken away. My one companion is darkness. And after this very dark psalm, we then say, Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Doctrinally, this psalm is very problematic. First of all, it clearly believes that once you're dead, that's it. There is no heaven. There is no settling of accounts after death. There's no making it up to you by God and taking you up to eternal bliss if you've suffered on earth. He says, will you work your wonders for the dead? I don't think so. Will the shades stand and praise you? They will not. When you go down to the shades, that's it. You're cut off as you are from his hand. You are no longer in the realm. You're no longer in the presence of God. So there's clearly no afterlife. But that reflects what the people believed at the time the psalm was composed. The other thing that is really problematic is we believe if you pray, God will answer. But here, Lord, why do you reject me? Why do you hide your face? He is praying. He has been praying. Not that he hasn't prayed hard enough. He's prayed extremely hard. This is an extremely eloquent prayer. And God rejects him. God hides his face. So it's not that this person is undergoing a dark night of the soul, as you might expect. He's actually plunged into blackness from which there is no escape. It's not really a question here of waiting until dawn. Nothing's going to happen. There's not going to be any change. My one companion is darkness. And he talks about the land of oblivion. He has gone to the land of oblivion where there is no justice. In other words, he's cut off from God's justice. Now, what exactly is the matter with the psalmist? What exactly is the matter with the man who speaks so eloquently here? What's the matter is he's ill. It's usually described as a prayer during illness. Well, it's much worse than that. This isn't somebody who's got an ache or a pain or even terminal cancer. This is somebody who is suffering from the depths of despair. This is somebody who has lost all faith, not only in God, but also, well, not quite in God, because they believe God is there. In many ways, they blame God for their predicament. Somebody who's lost all faith in life does not want to go on. This is the prayer of somebody who's about to commit suicide, even. So it's a mental anguish that this person is suffering rather than a physical anguish. Why is this psalm in the Psalter? Why do we have it before going to bed on Friday night? Well, it's in the Psalter for a very important reason, because it reflects what somebody somewhere at this moment is thinking. When you're praying this psalm, you're praying it on behalf of a person who's perhaps unable to pray the psalm, but who is in this state. It's a reminder to us in the Psalter that there are people today who are in absolute despair. It's also a reminder to us, who are not in absolute despair, that we must give hope to the despairing. This is very important. Um, and I think it's slightly problematic nowadays because I seem to remember from my youth, there were a whole load of trendy priests, they were all in their 60s in those days, and they're probably all dead now, who had the idea that we needed to be shaken up, that we needed to be, um, they would say, made to think. We needed to be challenged. Whereas, of course, I think that in those days I was on the other side of the fence, if you see what I mean. I was in the pew. I don't think we do need to be challenged. I don't think you do need to challenge people. They've got enough challenges of their own. I think we need to be reinforced in our faith. I think we need to be comforted and we need to be consoled. The ministry of consolation is what comes to mind when one reads this psalm. How are we consoling our despairing brothers and sisters? And indeed, there are so many who are despairing. One of the things I quite often do is funerals. I do a lot of funerals. And a lot of funerals are people who've died in their 40s. And they've died because, essentially, they've had hard lives. They've possibly known moments like this, so eloquently expressed in this psalm, and they've had problems with drink and alcohol, and they've had what are generally called nowadays mental health issues. This is the psalm of the person with mental health issues. I don't mean to say I'm not dismissing their despair, rather, I'm saying their despair is important, it needs to be listened to. Mental health issues isn't a label to just sort of bat people away, it's rather something we've got to do something about. So, how can we console these people who are suffering like this? A variety of reasons, I think. One is to recognize that what they're going through is something that we all go through to some extent. The psalmist in this psalm is an extreme case, and yet all of us, from time to time, feel the darkness closing in. So the darkness is not imaginary, it's real, and the darkness is inside many human beings, and it can be inside us as well. That is the first thing. So the last thing you do is minimize the problem or brush it away. One of the things I think that is very worrying in the modern Catholic Church, the contemporary Catholic Church, is a refusal to face up to problems. Quite often, if you go to somebody with some problem, they say, "Oh, no, 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 it's not true. What you're saying is not true." Well, no, sorry, I think you've got to say, "Hello, you tell me you're in despair. I understand you are in despair. Let's now see what we can do about it." Rather than saying, "Oh, no, you're not really in despair, blah, 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 blah." How many times when I was young have I heard the thing, "Oh, no, Father so-and-so isn't an alcoholic. He just likes a drink." Rubbish. He was an alcoholic. And of course, because you didn't deal with that, you also ignored all the other things about Father Thing that weren't right. Anyway, let's not go back into those polemics. But we've got to engage with the problem of despair as a real problem. Otherwise, we'll never get anywhere. And the other thing is, probably because despair is something you feel in your guts and in your heart rather than your head. The approach to despair has got to be heart to heart, guts to guts, rather than something that comes out of the head. We've got to avoid easy formulations. I think there are some easy formulations. Also, incidentally, this is a good prayer for the bereaved. They often feel like this. There are some formulations that we can use when we're dealing with people who are in despair. One thing is, this too will pass. It won't pass next week, it won't pass next month, but it may be looking different next year, and it will look different in 2 years' time. A phrase that I often use with people is, the first 2 years will be the worst, then things will get slightly better. And it's worth hanging on in there till things get slightly better. You'll have good days and you'll have bad days. Try and use the good days to recover from the bad days. This is actually just, and most people know that this is true, that despair
tends to be cyclical. Depression tends to be cyclical. Bereavement, the grief of bereavement tends to be cyclical. And so it goes up and it goes down, it goes up and it's down. Second thing is, this is your despair you're feeling. Do not struggle against it. I don't say give in to despair and throw yourself off a cliff and harm yourself. No, but acknowledge that this is your despair and don't feel guilty about make it worse by despairing. Rather, acknowledge this is the way you feel and these are your feelings and this is the turbulence inside you. Don't fight it. In other words, let it work through you. It can often be the case that people are bereaved and leading up to the funeral, for example, they have lots to do. They have to organise a funeral. They also have to do with various legal matters and so on. And it's the day after the funeral they're suddenly struck by the terrible emptiness that overcomes them. And you can't, in other words, you can't put off this terrible emptiness. This terrible emptiness has to be lived through. You have to live through this hour. There's a lovely prayer it's used in the vigil for the deceased when you bring a body into church the night before. It says, "Oh God, give us the courage to live through this hour." We don't deny this hour, we ask for the courage to live through this hour. The person making this prayer is very courageous because his formulation of the words is courageous. Now, friend and neighbour you have taken away. My one companion is darkness, and it may well seem like that. And there are people who have no friends and no neighbours. And yet, everybody surely has got a parish priest somewhere, and they can always go and find out that parish priest, and the parish priest, if he's not able to do it himself, will provide them with a friend or a neighbour. I think this is very important. This is a wake-up call, cliche, it is a wake-up call to us to remember there are people out there feeling friendless and neighbourless, and we need to go and tell them, you're not friendless, you're not neighbourless, you're not alone. And I think the only consolation people have in misery is to know that their misery is acknowledged by others, they're not alone. But as I say, the misery has got to work out. Okay, well, that's just a few thoughts about this psalm. It is problematic, but it's real, isn't it? And we make a serious mistake in thinking in dismissing it. And I think that it's facile of religion, particularly contemporary religion, to say that there's a solution for every problem. Sometimes there's not a solution for every problem. The only solution is time. It needs to work out. It needs to work out. And human solutions, human interventions, are quite often the wrong sort of interventions. Let it work its way out. Okay, I hope that helps. We'll talk about this again because there's another psalm coming up, which we'll do next, which is rather similar and yet also at the same time very different. All the very best. Bye.